That one I do not. Welcome, everybody, to the Four-Star Sports Show. I've got Tomas Romo of Texags.com. Tomas, thanks for coming on, man.
Oh, of course. I appreciate you having me. I know we talked, what was it, back when A&M played Arkansas in the Southwest Classic, and here we are now, start of the new year, still talking football.
Most definitely. All right, we'll be right back in just a second from a quick word from our sponsors. All right, so man, kind of flub that up a little bit. But that's okay. So man, how's everything going down there in Aggieland for you?
There's a lot of optimism. I think that's the best word to describe it. I mean, if we're talking football terms, we just had our spring game, and we saw what happened last season, especially if you look at that LSU game. Everyone here in College Station looks at that LSU game and looks at the potential this team could have with a full offseason, with, you know, the guys finally understanding to play with each other, because it was a young team last year. Clyde Petrino comes in. The offense is going to look a little different, and don't forget you got a guy in Connor Wigman, who, in my personal belief, I think he is a guy within the next 2 seasons who could be a Heisman contender and potentially be a first-round pick in the NFL draft.
And I know that you mentioned Coach Petrino there for a second. He's definitely made his rounds here in the SEC. He had a cup of coffee with UNLV, and for whatever reason, bolted, landed on his feet at Texas A&M. I'll be very frank with you. It doesn't matter where this guy goes. Doesn't matter the baggage that carries with him. This guy just produces and wins.
Yeah, he does. And that's the thing. You kind of know what the baggage is. I think that's a good way of putting it. And knowing that he just, leaves out of places and he does his own thing, but now he finds himself at Texas A&M. And if you would think about where else he could have been, this is probably the best case scenario for Petrino. I mean, he's going to an SEC school, an up-and-coming SEC school, if you want to say it that way. I mean, A&M had high expectations last year, but now I'm telling you that LSU game has people in College Station talking. And if you're looking forward to this season, there's nothing but optimism and excitement because this team can only go forward from what they did last year.
Most definitely. And you think about it with Coach Petrino for a second. He was in D2 with Missouri State, then goes to the Group of Five, and now lands on his feet in the SEC, like I said. What type of optimism does the fan base have with the type of schemes that he has with the pieces that A&M brings to the table?
I think you have to look at the tight end position. I think that is going to be, I would say, the only thing that would really change for A&M, I would say offensively. I think a lot of bit more pre-snap motion as well with his receivers. But I think about the tight ends. I mean, we've had Max Wright, one of the tight ends here at A&M. He's come out and said he loves this new offense or the new look to it because it utilizes the tight end, especially in the middle of the field. Don't forget, Donovan Green was a freshman last year, a true freshman at that. And when he was on the field, he made some very nice plays. They're talking about a guy who might exceed expectations. I mean, remember a couple years ago, Jalen Weidemeyer, he was the talk of the town at that tight end position. There's talks now that Donovan Green is going to be even better than what Weidemeyer was, and also having a veteran like Max Wright as well stick around for another year to kind of continue building that relationship with some of these younger guys, as well as being a veteran presence in that locker room.
Yeah, most definitely. And yeah, look at Jimbo, and he had that number 1 recruiting class coming into last season. And you had some pieces move here and there. But for the most part, it's you have some great some defensive presence there that is coming back too as well.
Damani Richardson, I think that's the main guy. If you want to circle someone on a piece of paper, it's Damani Richardson. I mean, let's talk about it this way. He had made a heck of a play against Arkansas in the Southwest Classic. But I think another aspect of Richardson is everyone says, well, he didn't play that good last year. Well, he played the whole season hurt. He came out and said that he was banged up all year long. Didn't feel like it was right to try and go into the NFL draft or do the combine or anything like that because he wasn't 100%. This extra year for him to return, I think he's going to be a staple of that defense. He's going to be a leader on that side of the ball, and I expect him to have a really good year. I mean, people forget 2 years ago, he was a guy that everyone was talking about here in College Station that he had a potential to be one of the top safeties coming into the draft. But injuries have kind of plagued his career a little bit. I'm looking for him to bounce back, get healthy. And if he's able to be on the field, I mean, this is a dude who has the potential to be a mid-round pick in the NFL draft because his intangibles are off the charts.
Yes, most definitely they are. And you kind of look at some of the secondary pieces that with A&M had. For instance, Arkansas, KJ Jefferson gets hurt, and you kind of wonder how's this going to work out a little bit. And then he also had that huge blunder. I have no idea why this guy tried to Superman from 5 yards out, gets the ball knocked out, and I really feel like that was kind of the momentum change for the Aggies. And I don't know if last year Arkansas couldn't afford those mistakes, but I think Arkansas might be able to with the additions of the new co-defensive coordinators. But do you think that defensively A&M still has that firepower to make those game-changing plays?
I think they do. They've lost Jalen Jones to the draft. They're going to lose Antonio Johnson. Bobby Taylor, he is transferring out of A&M. He announced this past week. But A&M also has been pretty active in the transfer portal. Today, they added a linebacker, a former Jackson State linebacker, Durante Davis. And then a couple of days ago, they added former Boston College cornerback Josh DeBerry. And I think another aspect, too, when it comes to this A&M defense, I know we talked about Richardson, but that defensive line is returning a lot of players who were young last year. Don't forget about the linebacking core led by Cooper. I mean, this is a defensive unit that didn't play good last year. I mean, you can't really beat around the bush, but they were really young and really inexperienced. Having a whole nother offseason with a defense coordinator, DJ Durkin, at the helm, I think will only make them better. Also, too, you're playing in the SEC. It's the toughest conference in football for a reason. And you're throwing out 18, 19-year-old guys who just came out of high school into a totally different level of football that they were not accustomed to. But again, having that year of experience, playing with, these younger guys around them, it's only going to elevate them going into this next season.
So let's talk a little bit about the spring game for just a few moments. What was your take from the overall performance of the team?
Overall, I liked what I saw. Did I really see a lot, though? No. There was not much of this new offense that we would think you would see in a spring game. A lot of it looked really the same. A couple things were different, don't get me wrong. But I think what stood out for me personally was the quarterback play, and especially the quarterback play of Max Johnson. I know Wigman has been the guy, but people forget how good Max Johnson was when he was at LSU. And last year, he showed flashes of it as well. Wigman threw for 243 and a touchdown, but Johnson was the better passer in this game. 21 of 37, 273 yards with 3 touchdowns through the air. I think for A&M fans, while Wigman is the guy, and I truthfully do believe that, but Max Johnson is not a bad number 2 to have. And he's a guy, anything happens to Wigman, he can slide in and run this offense. And I think another aspect of this, too, is he can use his legs. He's not as mobile as Wigman, but Max Johnson understands when he needs to tuck and run. We saw it last year. We saw some flashes of it in the spring game. But from the running back position, watch out for Ruben Owens. He's going to be filling in for Devon Achane this year. And the freshman, Owens, he's got a spark to him. He led the team in rushing yards in the spring game. And there's been talks about at practice that this guy is the truth. He is the real deal. And I'm excited to watch him play this fall.
And another thing, I know that A&M, they were 5-7 last year. And there was a lot of influx. I'm not sure. I can't talk about what all happened inside the locker room. You kind of saw some of the dysfunction there on the field a little bit. And I think that that was something that Jimbo really wanted to kind of take back that piece for himself and say, hey, you know what, this thing is on me, and we have to make sure that we're going to put out the best product that we can. And I think that one of those things was starting with getting Bobby Petrino back into the fold. Not really, I wouldn't say a guy that really kind of forces the hand of making sure that everybody's in lockstep with each other, but he really definitely requires you to stay within yourself in that clubhouse and in the locker room. And that honestly can help balance that out. With Jimbo kind of trying to, I wouldn't say right the ship, but kind of turn it back into the right direction. Do you think that that's something that he can really go into a recruit's house this, over the summer, this fall, and say, hey, you know what? Last year was on me, but this year's also going to be on me too.
I think so. I think also when you look at this team and the potential and you're having those conversations, I don't think anyone's naive to think that A&M doesn't have something going for them. I know that's been a really consistent theme over the last couple of seasons with the number one recruiting class and with all the hype around the Aggies. But we knew going into last year that this was a young team and there was going to probably be some dysfunction. Probably not in the way that was, brought about or what that was expected. But I will say this, those dysfunctions and those players within the locker room are no longer part of the team. And I mean, even some of the players have said those guys are gone. This is a new slate. This is a new team. This is a new year. And I think recruits and other, students looking at A&M, student athletes especially, are going to understand what they're playing for here in College Station, the atmosphere of Kyle Field, what it means to be an Aggie, and to know that you have a guy in Jimbo Fisher as your head coach, Bobby Petrino is your offensive coordinator, and DJ Durkin is your defensive coordinator. I mean, that is a very staff, man. That's a stacked staff. I mean, there's no other way to beat around the bush. And A&M has the young talent. They're one of the youngest teams in the SEC, and everyone knows what's going to happen this season. Everyone's got their eyes on the prize here in Aggieland. There's no reason that A&M should not win at least 8 games next year. A part of me really believes that we're talking about a potential 10-win team, depending how good Connor Wigman does in his second full year as the starter potentially. The potential's off the charts. Don't even let me get me started on Evan Stewart. I mentioned Ruben Owens, but this offense is going to be young. They're going to be quick. They're going to be fast, and they're going to be talented.
So let's talk about what did you see from the offensive line during that spring game. I don't know too many questions that you would be going to in this season, but they were able to open some incredible holes for Ruben A-Chain. Or was it Devontae A-Chain? Sorry. And does that carry over into this next season?
I think so. I also, too, if you really want to think about it, last year, that offensive line was getting mixed up every other week almost because somebody was hurt or someone was injured. I mean, Bryce Foster is the backbone of this offensive line, and he found himself in and out of the lineup multiple times throughout the season. He was hurt. He was sick. He was banged up, but he wasn't the only one. I think getting your offensive line healthy is the most important thing. I think also, too, A&M has the depth there because they played so many different combinations last year that they at least know how to work well with some of these other guys on the interior offensive line and even the tackle position. I mean, Ruben Fothery, I expect him to play a lot better than he did last year. I think all of it just comes back to the offensive scheme. What is Bobby Petrino going to do offensively with the weapons that he has? Is he going to focus on the ground game with guys like Ruben Owens or Junior Amari Daniels, or is he going to focus on what he's got on the outside with a guy like Evan Stewart and Moose Muhammad? We already know what Wigman can do through the air, but what about using his legs? I think a huge thing in college football now, your quarterback has to be a two-way guy. I'm not saying he has to be a Lamar Jackson, a Jalen Hurts, or a Caleb Williams where you got to take off and run, but being able to escape the pocket and understand, hey, I got a free 5-7 yards in front of me. I'm not going to force it. I'm going to tuck it and run. And Wigman and even Max Johnson have that potential.
I honestly think that what the A&M faithful are going to see this year too is that you're going to start to see a lot more receivers get into open spaces. Mm-hmm. That's where Bobby Petrino really shines. And you get into that area where you may not have some of these guys that you may not have heard too much about. All of a sudden, they've got 15, 20 catches 8 games into the season, and you're kind of sitting there thinking, wow, where has this been this whole time? As an Arkansas fan, when Bobby first came here, felt the same way. Missouri State fans felt the same way too. And Arkansas got hurt with that because Missouri State marched up and down the field last year on Arkansas with that exact uh, whole game plan, and not mobile, but just mobile enough to keep the defense off balance. And I think that that's what A&M is also going to see this year.
I agree. I think the element of not knowing what's coming for this A&M offense. I think last year they were very predictable. I think they got one-dimensional at times, and it really showed up on the football field. I mean, think about how many games where you go, man, if A&M could just find a way to move the football. I think about the Auburn game, especially if they were just able to get past the 50, 40-yard line and get into opponent's territory, they probably would have won like 3 more games. Look at the Alabama game. They were a play away from beating Alabama on the road. The team is there. I mean, everyone wants to talk about the losses or that. Who cares? You know, you didn't win the game, you lost.
Yeah.
But to be head-to-head with some of the better teams in the SEC, I know they didn't win, but they held their own. They really did hold their own. And I think we're going to see that next level step up where A&M is no longer going to not be able to come in and potentially win those games, but they're going to now have the opportunity to close out those games and rely on that ground game, because I think that, like we were talking about earlier, this offensive line is going to be a lot better because they're going to be healthy.
So let's shift gears for just a second. Let's take a look at fall coming up in August, whenever fall practice starts, and that's schedule. You look at first game of the season, you got New Mexico. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to say it's a cupcake, but it is a really nice tune-up game for that next one when you go down to Miami.
Miami, I will say this about Miami. I said this past season when they came to Kyle Field. Miami isn't good. They are, I believe, one of the most overrated teams, in not only the ACC, but of college football. Tanner Van Dyke is not the answer. I remember coming into this season, people were talking about him being the number 2, number 3 quarterback prospect potentially in the draft. No, Miami hasn't been able to show us anything since De'Aaron King was there, and even then they weren't that good. They were barely able to win 10 games. Miami on the road doesn't scare me. I think the schedule really starts for A&M September 30th, the Southwest Classic against Arkansas, because that 3-game stretch is going to be tough for the Aggies. They got Arkansas, Alabama at home, and then they're going to be traveling to Tennessee. Yeah. That's probably the toughest 3-game stretch right there, but it does get easier on the back half of the schedule. But like I said, September 30th, I know that's where A&M fans have their calendar marked, because if you're able to go, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins right off the bat, taking on Alabama at Kyle Field, I mean, there's no reason to doubt that College Game Day is going to be at that game, and that's what Aggie fans want to see.
Most definitely. And you go back, and I'm going to kind of go back just a little bit with Auburn for just a second. You have another team that's kind of in flux a little bit with the way they didn't have let's rephrase this for just a second. Auburn, they didn't have the season that they thought they would. Then that's whenever you saw all that mess happen. You get him out, and now you got Hugh Freeze in there. And that really kind of sits there and makes your head scratch for a second and say, what is this guy going to do in year one?
I agree. I think there's a lot of unknowns with Auburn, but when you look about just the talent on the field, right? When you just look at the talent, do they have some pieces? Yes. But are they really going to compete with the Arkansas, the A&Ms, potentially the Bamas, the LSUs, the Tennessee, even Ole Miss? No, I don't see them being at that level. I mean, Auburn is going to be lucky just to get into a bowl game next year. That's the way that I see it. And Hugh Freeze, we saw what he did at Liberty, right? It took him a couple seasons, took about 2 seasons, 3 seasons for him to really turn the program around. Next 5 years, Auburn, maybe 3-5 years from now, we're maybe having a different conversation. But I think he is probably the right guy for the job to get Auburn turned around, because the dysfunction they have had since Gus Malzahn left for UCF has been absurd. I don't see them making strides this season, but hopefully in the next couple of years, I expect the Tigers to pick it up.
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. I was at SEC Media Days last July, and you could see that Brian Harsin was just wearing every ounce of the offseason on his shoulder. And I'm pretty sure that that guy actually might be kind of happy with not being there, really. And
I would be
you
too
look
there.
that I'm telling you, man, if you have board of trustees trying to go after your job, and I don't know the situation in depth. Only what we've heard on social media and in sports reporting. But you look at what the Auburn faithful have done. We're kind of going off track here for just a second, but I think it warrants that, like the message that I had sent you a few months ago about stuff in the locker room. Sounded like it was fabricated. You don't know about what could be true, what couldn't be true, and how people were trying to go after Jimbo during the season a little bit. If Arkansas, they got co-defensive coordinators that are coming in. Dan Enos, you got all new coordinators. If it doesn't work out for Sam, I hope that it doesn't happen, but you might see something of that nature too. That's something in college football that you just can't get away from.
And it's something that if you let it linger, it continues to stick. I mean, I know it's a little different, right? We're talking Auburn because of dysfunction, but we just talked about it with a team like Miami. I feel like they're dysfunctional every year. They have these super high expectations. They finally get the coach that they want. They finally get their quarterback or their coordinator. They get a big signee, and nothing happens. And nothing changes because of the way they continue to run the program. Hopefully for Auburn, that doesn't happen. I don't think Hugh Freeze will allow it to happen because just what he's been able to do in the past and the type of coach he is and the way he's going to want to turn around the program. But I agree with you. I mean, if you let that stay around, that dysfunction, that almost like a virus infect your locker room, it's tough to get it out.
It really is. So let's talk about some off-season moves here for just a few moments before we get out of here. You have, the number one recruiting class coming into Texas A&M in 2022. And then you had, 7 of those recruits left. And you talked about addition by subtraction. Arkansas had the same thing happen. We had some, I would say some influx in the locker room. I talked with Otis Kirk from hogville.net today about that. And that was exactly what he said was addition by subtraction. How has that helped the locker room for A&M so far?
I think it has built a much better culture. I think you're able to look around, the locker room, and these guys are saying, okay, he's been here with me. He's been through, what we went through last year. He saw the dysfunction, but hey, he didn't transfer out. He stuck it out. He's still here with me, and I think that is huge. I think that is critical. The guys who stayed at A&M, who didn't transfer or who didn't leave, those guys right there understand what A&M is trying to build, the culture and the program of what they want to do these next couple years. And they believe in the system that Jimbo Fisher has brought in. They believe in the coordinators. They believe in the coaches and the players around them. I think that's the biggest takeaway from this offseason is the guys that are here want to be here. And I don't think last year that was necessarily the case. I think there's a lot of other issues that, went on. But this season is different because that dysfunction's out of there. It's left. A&M has brought in hopefully a new type of offense that's going to change some things around. But you also just are able to look at these guys from across the locker room and know that, hey, he's got my back. He's been through thick and thin with me. Now let's go try and show the world that, hey, we do belong in the SEC and we're a lot better than we showed last year.
So what are some names that we should be looking for here in the first couple, I would say probably the first 4 or 5 games of the season from the 2023 recruiting class that could definitely make a difference for the Aggies right off the bat?
I know I mentioned earlier, but I will continue to say Ruben Owens. I mean, this guy, just talking about practice, right? Before even the spring game, when you had these spring practices, there was talks around saying, wow, this guy showed up and he was already getting first team touches. He was that much better than a lot of these other guys already off the jump. And Jimbo Fisher has talked about his maturity and wanting to get better as a player and wanting to learn this offense. And I think that is huge for especially these young guys coming in, just being a sponge. We know what he can do on the football field, especially with the ball in his hands, but understanding the concepts, understanding the games, understanding the protections, everything that comes with playing the running back position at a high level. It seems like Ruben Owens has really tried to understand what A&M and Jimbo Fisher wants from him. And I see the sky's the limit for him. I mean, we've seen Isaiah Spiller go to the NFL draft. Devon Achane's going to the draft this year.
Yep.
who says, and they're talking that Ruben Owens might be better than both of them.
That's crazy to think because Devon A-Chain last year, and we talked about this when we were talking about the A&M Classic or the Southwest Classic, that he was a guy that you really had to contain and keep inside the tackles and make sure that you got a spy on him. Ruben Owens is able to eclipse that, and he's a 5'11", 190 pound running back, kind of I would say kind of an Emmitt Smith type size guy. But if he's able to really find some holes and kind of really maneuver himself there behind that offensive line, I kind of agree with you. I think that he could really be a huge weapon for A&M.
And I think he will be a little bit more of a weapon than you think in the passing game. I think that's another aspect to look at this offense is how is Petrino going to utilize his running backs, not only, getting the ball, handing it off, but on screens or potentially lining them up in the slot, motion, whatever else it may be, trying to get, your playmakers the ball as quick as possible. I think that's another huge aspect as well. We saw in the spring game a little bit, especially some of these wide receiver screens that we necessarily didn't see last year of trying to get the ball to our better players.
And then one guy from the defensive side that you think that might kind of take some folks by surprise.
This is a name that most people know already, but Edgerrin Cooper, I think everyone talks about him every season. I'm like, oh, this is his year. This is the year he's going to step up. Last year, I think there was a lot of pressure on him to be the guy because of the inexperience of the defensive side, because it was a whole new team pretty much on that side of the ball. I think for him now having this offseason with the players that are going to be returning on the defensive line and in the linebacker room, I think for him personally, this is his make or break year because there are a lot of talent on this A&M defense. There's other recruits that are always going to be coming, and linebacker is such a huge position, especially in the SEC. I mean, you want to talk about LSU for a second? Talk about Harold Perkins. He was supposed to come
that
to
guy. Holy cow, that guy.
Exactly.
He's crazy.
It's unbelievable what you can do when you have a linebacker who can do everything on the field. And Cooper has that potential. I mean, he's a guy that was expected to be better against the run. He struggled last year, but I really do see him to turn the table and really pick it up a notch, knowing that, hey, this is it for him if he wants to continue playing at a high level and be a focal point for this A&M defense.
I have intentionally kind of stepped away from not really going after the Southwest Classic coming up in September. And the reason why is because I want to bring you back on for that. And I want to go toe to toe with you about it because I got some weapons. I got KJ in my back pocket. I got Antonio Greer that came over with Coach Williams, new defensive coordinator from UCF. I'm telling you, it's going to be fun, and I really want to bring you back. Now, I do have one question for you before we get you out of here.
Hit me.
Whenever you go down to Dallas, say for the Southwest Classic, what's the first place you're going to hit to as far as an eatery right there?
Man, the first place I always got to go when I go to Dallas, I always go to Texas Live because the best part about it is you get there, you got all the TVs around there, you're watching ball, you're hanging out, it's a good time, and then hey, in about 3 hours, I'm going to go see A&M play Arkansas. In Jerry's world, there's nothing better.
Most definitely, yeah. And I'll be honest with you, that place is great. And if I have to be honest with you, if I could pull off a little bit of time in Six Flags before I go over to the game, I'm golden.
That's another. Six Flags in Dallas is always does the trick. I always went to the one in San Antonio growing up, but I've been.
I did too.
Times. The ones in Dallas, it's nice. They got some cool rides. They got some stuff.
Hey, do they still have the laser show down there at Fiesta, Texas?
They do, but it's only like rare occasions. Like they do it seasonally, I believe. Yeah.
There you go, man. I used to go there when I was a kid, and man, watching the laser show there on the side of that rock face and stuff, man, I'm going to tell you what, that place was incredible.
Yep, I know exactly what you're talking about. I remember the same thing. I love it.
All right, well, Tomas, thank you so much, man, for being on, and I can't wait for you to come back and join us in September.
Of course, I appreciate it anytime.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.